This is the portrait of a veteran. This is the portrait of a man who was ready to do whatever his country asked. This is the portrait of a veteran who would fight again, if he could. No, he wasn't wounded. It wasn't an enemy shot that crippled him. It's not a wound of battle that makes him walk this way. Yet this soldier was crippled by the war. He was one of the tens of thousands of men who were mobilized. Away from home, away from friends, away from old habits, he was struck by an enemy in the blood, by a germ. The spirochete, the germ that causes syphilis. Syphilis that came, then seemed to go away, but stayed in the blood to cripple him later on. This is the portrait of a veteran of World War I, a portrait of one of the thousands of soldiers taken from duty by syphilis, one of the thousands crippled, some killed, by the enemy in the blood. But this is a sickness and a death that is preventable. Syphilis can be fought and beaten, and in the laboratory they are fighting it. In the laboratory they've found new and powerful weapons against syphilis. There's the microscope test that searches out the spirochete and helps the doctor find the early infection. There's the blood test that can search the blood for syphilis. Doctors send blood samples here for laboratory testing. The technician examines the blood and finds negative. This patient is not infected. Negative. This patient is not infected. Positive. Danger. This patient may have syphilis. Then the doctor examines him for other signs and does a second blood test to check the first. And if the patient is infected, then he can be treated. The infection can be fought with the weapons of the laboratory. And the infection can be conquered if the patient takes the full course of treatment. The laboratory has found the chemicals that cure syphilis: bismuth, mercury, and arsenic. Early treatment with these chemicals is insurance against a child born dead or crippled, insurance against a heart weakened by syphilis. Yes, the battle in the laboratory is well fought, but this is only half the fight. Here is where the other half of the fight must be made. Here in the schools and colleges. Here where syphilis strikes at the fighting strength of the country, in the Navy. And among the soldiers, here we must fight. And in the mills and plants where the nation's work is done. Here where the people are. This is where venereal disease strikes. And this is where the other half of the fight must be fought. It can only be fought here, among the people and by the people. By people who know the enemy, how he strikes and how to strike back. Know the danger spots of the city. The places where the disease begins. The places that infect the city and infect its people. The places with the easy pickups. Yes, these are the danger spots. The places that breed syphilis. Know the other danger spots, the dark, the hidden streets, the places that are whispered about. Are the danger spots. Here the disease begins. Yes, here it begins. Here a new chain of infection starts, a chain of infection that will take lives of children to be born and bring people to hospitals, to insanity, and to blindness. Here it begins. And spreads from one part of the city to another, from one person to many people, One infected person carrying infection to many people, and the infection spreading from them to countless others. And with the disease come the quacks, the charlatans who thrive wherever people are ignorant, who bring disaster wherever people have failed to fight syphilis, the quacks who promise cures, but never cure. Don't worry, kid, I can cure you. It's no worse than a bad cold. I'll clear it up for you. Here, drink this. Cure is guaranteed. 30 years as specialist in men's diseases. $1 a bottle, it's cheap, kid. You can't go wrong with this stuff. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. But he can go wrong. He will go wrong unless the people fight with knowledge, with treatment, with blood tests to search the enemy out. Yes, the people must fight to guard against the blindness that syphilis may cause, to prevent the insanity the disease can bring, to prevent the crippling, the broken minds, the twisted limbs, the suffering and the poverty. All these the people must fight. And the fight must be swift and hard, because every day the casualties mount. Thousands are sick and idle, and important jobs are left undone. Production is sabotaged by syphilis. And men already under arms are struck by the disease. In 1917, the Army lost 7 million days from active duty. Syphilis is the sniper, the saboteur behind the lines. But it strikes not in the field, not in the camps, but in the towns. That is where syphilis must be fought. So if the people learn, if they'll go to the doctors and the clinics to find the skills that will make them safe, if each person will guard himself, he can help destroy this waster of America. He can save his own and the nation's strength for production, for the nation's security, for all the work and joy of living. The people can raise this shadow from the land, from their homes, if the people learn, if they fight syphilis.
Oh, come on and drink your coffee, Jesse. You've been standing there for half an hour.
Could you bring it over here, Helen? I've got to keep an eye on these clouds.
Well, the least you can do is sit down.
Thanks, Helen. I got to keep watching this southwest side. It's where most of them come from.
You think it's likely?
No. The odds are way against it, even in weather like this. I've never seen one, but there's always a chance. Weather Bureau wouldn't issue a tornado alert without some good reason. Operator, operator, this is an emergency call. I want the Elmville Weather Bureau, Main 2100. This is Brummett, Mr. Powell. Tornado about a mile east of the Winton pumping station. Moving fast your way, northeast. Yes, the bottom is touching the ground.
Yes, that day, Elmville was struck by a tornado. Most violent type of storm on Earth. Normally, we can expect about 180 tornadoes each year in the United States. They can occur anywhere in the nation. However, the greatest number occur in the flat land areas east of the Rocky Mountains. Each individual tornado is a violent local vortex in the atmosphere. The tornado's parent is a thundercloud, and the vortex suddenly descends to rotate wildly along the Earth in an upward spiraling motion. The funnel consists of air and moisture to which dust, mud, and debris are added by the inrushing winds, estimated to be rotating at speeds as high as 500 miles an hour. Tornadoes are usually funnel-shaped, although they may take the form of a rope, an elephant trunk, or a column. Although its sweep is generally only about 400 yards wide and up to 16 miles long, a tornado's destructive power is appalling. Strong buildings are reduced to rubble, automobiles lifted and flung through the air, great trees whirled about like toothpicks. The creation of a partial vacuum within the vortex can cause buildings literally to explode when the funnel passes close to them. No one knows all the facts about tornadoes, but meteorologists can detect the thunderstorm conditions that give birth to them. The presence of layers of air of contrasting temperature, moisture, density, and wind flow. Such combinations of conditions may generate a tornado. But when the clouds become unusually threatening, it is wise to take every possible precaution. That calls for forewarning. And it is the responsibility of the United States Weather Bureau to provide the public with information regarding the possibility of severe local storms, including tornadoes. Such advance notice can save many lives and even help reduce property damage. To forecast the development of dangerous conditions, the Weather Bureau has established the Severe Local Storm Warning Center at Kansas City. The staff which mans this office specializes in forecasting storm conditions, not only for the Kansas City area, but for all parts of the country. Local conditions on which these men base their predictions are fed into the center constantly by thousands of observation posts across the continent. From local Weather Bureau offices come reports of surface weather conditions. Upper air conditions, which may be very different from those on the ground, are checked by weather balloons. Radar stations scan cloud formations at varying altitudes to detect dense moisture patterns, the beginning of bad weather as a rule. Specially equipped Air Force and Navy weather reconnaissance planes fly far beyond the continental limits to secure information on incoming weather. All of these observations are funneled into the Kansas City Center, along with nationwide weather charts prepared at the Bureau's Analysis Center in Washington and transmitted by facsimile. Piecing together all this information, the staff prepares a detailed analysis of areas in which violent squall lines, hailstorms, and other dangerous weather conditions are likely to occur, where a tornado may develop. But to see it, if it actually does develop, the Weather Bureau needs the help of the other vital link in the network, the Volunteer Observer Group. In Elmville, for example, the head of the local Weather Bureau had organized an observer network 2 years before the tornado struck. The first purpose of the Observer Corps was to spot actual tornado clouds and advise the Weather Bureau of their location and movement. Another aim was to inform the public about safe behavior during storms, about avoiding false rumors and panic. In the Elmville network, trained observers were stationed about 2 miles apart, with the heaviest concentration southwest of the city. All were pledged to watch any questionable weather, to report promptly to the Weather Bureau any dangerous-looking storms. One of them was Jesse Brummett, whose farm was located southwest of Elmville. One warm, muggy day in May, the forecasters in the Kansas City Center became concerned about conditions in an area to the southwest. These men have a heavy responsibility. They cannot needlessly alarm the public. But when loss of life may be possible, their duty is clear. In this case, they felt that severe storm activity might be expected to the southwest in an area 160 miles long and 80 miles wide. The Weather Bureau office responsible for distributing warnings in that area was Elmville. The district forecaster in Kansas City immediately called the Elmville Weather Bureau.
And I think there will probably be several of them in your area before the afternoon.
From 50 west of Lawton, northeastward. Looks like it'll be right in here.
That's a pretty hot area.
That's pretty warm.
Let me get that out on the press radio right away.
A severe weather forecast was issued for the Elmville area. All public outlets were advised. Police, radio and television stations, and news networks, and the Elmville Observer Network was alerted. This was not a tornado warning. Its purpose was merely to alert the public to the possibility of a tornado occurring somewhere in the Elmville area.
We interrupt this newscast to bring you this severe weather forecast issued by the United States Weather Bureau at Elmville. There are indications that locally severe thunderstorms will southward back to the west border of Wallaby. Within this area and perhaps
The public
in touch
reacted
areas,
calmly.
scattered thunderstorms.
They had learned from the network's information program that this alert meant only that storm conditions existed, that no tornado had yet developed. They knew that experienced observers were at their stations watching, that if and when a tornado developed, they would be warned. So they went about their business as usual, except that practically every radio and TV set in the area was turned on. Mid-afternoon, towering thunderheads had appeared with a sickly greenish-black color. On Jesse Brummett's farm, a heavy rain was falling, and he came indoors to watch from his kitchen. Then, at 3:26,
This is Brummett, Mr. Powell. Tornado about a mile east of Winton Pumping Station.
A mile east of Winton Pumping Station. Looks like a bad one. Okay, we'll take it from there.
this was it. Brummett's call gave Elmville nearly 30 minutes to get ready. Powell and his assistants issued an immediate tornado warning to all communities in the path of the storm.
Community. Would you spread the warning, please?
The exact location of the tornado was flashed to the nearest radar station, which began to track it. What they saw were echoes from a number of storms over a radius of many miles. But most important, the peculiar S-shaped echo of the tornado cloud Brummett had spotted. Now, they could follow its path and report any change of speed or direction. Meanwhile, warned by television, radio, and telephone, the public followed tornado safety rules. Those with storm cellars had the best protection. People in open country sought ditches or ravines. Lying flat in a depression will guard against one of the greatest hazards, flying debris as deadly as shrapnel. In homes, doors and windows on the north and east sides were opened to help reduce damage to the buildings. Families took shelter in the southwest corner of their homes, in basements if they had them. In apartments, office buildings, and factories, people moved to prearranged positions against inside walls on the lower floors. And in schools, because of practice drills, the pupils went to their assigned places on the lower floors, away from windows and large roof areas. Within minutes, the people of Elmville had taken shelter. There was no panic, for this was an informed community. Five minutes later, the tornado roared into the city. Then it was gone, as suddenly as it came. The wind shifted and the air cleared over a scene of devastation. Property damage totaled millions of dollars, but no lives were lost, and there were few injuries. Without the Weather Bureau warning, without the local storm warning network, without the calm cooperation of an informed public, the toll might have been tragically high. Nothing can prevent a tornado or any other storm, but the United States Weather Bureau is predicting their approach with ever-increasing accuracy. A large part of the tornado safety program is in the hands of the public. Every community in an area subject to these storms should have an active local warning network. If you live in such an area, support your local network. If you don't have one, start one. The nearest Weather Bureau office will furnish detailed information and assistance. Such self-reliance may save the lives of your family, your friends, and your neighbors, if you are ever in the path of a tornado.
Easy, Mr. Carson. Would you give me that other pill there, please? Yeah, that's better. Does it hurt when you breathe? You say this came on suddenly?
Yes, he was all right when he came home from work. He ate a good dinner. We watched television for a while and went to bed early. And then about an hour ago, he woke up choking and coughing. He said he had a pain in his chest and he had trouble breathing. Is it his heart?
It could be. Looks more like pneumonia. We'll have to get him to a hospital right away. Better. I think we've stopped the buildup of fluid in the lungs, and he's breathing a lot more easily now.
But what caused it?
I don't know. Could be an infection. It looks like pneumonia, but it hasn't got the fever usually present. By the way, what type work does your husband do, Mrs. Carson?
Well, he works in a metal shop.
Mr. Stone, the man from the health department here to see you. Thanks. Oh, hello, Martin.
How are you, Roger? Fine. What are you doing out this way?
Checking on someone named Carson's.
Ike Carson's?
Yes. I understand he works for you.
Oh, that's right. I don't think he's here today, though.
He's in the hospital.
What's the matter?
Well, his doctor isn't sure. We think it could be nitrogen dioxide poisoning.
I don't see how he could have gotten it here. You know our exhaust system. You fellas helped us set it up.
Joe? Is this where Carson's works? You know, when he's dipping. Weren't you working with Carson's yesterday?
Yeah, why?
All day?
Till about closing time, just about. That's when the power went off.
There was some trouble down the road. We lost our electric power for a while. Couldn't have been more than 10, 15 minutes.
We stopped dipping when the blower went out.
What about Carson's?
He had a few pieces to do. I guess he finished. Anything wrong?
Plenty. Carson's in the hospital.
I guess that's the answer.
I'm not sure. No, Ike's been doing this work for years. He knows this stuff's dangerous. Besides, he couldn't have gotten much.
He wouldn't have to. You mind if I use the phone, Roger?
Use the one in my office.
I want to call Carson's doctor.
Today, everyone recognizes that certain kinds of work are more dangerous than others. Sometimes the danger comes from the conditions under which men work. Sometimes it's in the materials they use. But there are other hazards too. Hazards even more dangerous because they can't always be seen. And often, even when they are recognized, they're not taken seriously. Since most of these hazards are difficult to detect, many workers suffer daily exposure without even being aware of it. Today, it's becoming more and more obvious that almost every kind of work has its hidden health hazards. And these are steadily increasing as we go on to develop new processes and new materials. But there's nothing new about many of the hazards. Long before the birth of Christ, physicians knew that certain trades left their mark on workers. The miner's difficulty in breathing, the colic of lead workers, the tremors of mercury workers. They even developed devices to protect these workers. But ancient society had a simpler solution. It used slaves and criminals in the dangerous trades. The world saw many changes during the next 1,500 years, but the working conditions remained much the same. The only important difference was that now the work was done by free men, and there was more interest in protecting their health. During the 15th and 16th centuries, more people than ever before were working in the metal trades. And scientists began to take a special interest in the health of these workers. Agricola, in his scholarly study on mining and smelting, warned some of them,
"Miners should pay as much attention to ventilation as to digging, for when the air becomes stagnant, it causes them to breathe with difficulty, and sometimes they are even suffocated. Some mines are so dry that they are entirely devoid of water, and this dryness causes the workman even greater harm, for if the dust has corrosive qualities, it eats away the lungs and implants consumption into the body."
But mining was only one of the occupations of the time. And in the 17th century, Bernardino Ramazzini, an Italian physician, set out to study all of them. His studies merely confirmed what he already suspected. Various and manifold is the harvest of disease reaped by certain workers from the crafts and trades that they pursue. All the profit they get is fatal injury to their health. Ramazzini also offered a simple piece of practical advice to his medical colleagues. When a doctor visits a working-class home, he should take time for his examination. And to the questions recommended by Hippocrates, he should add one more.
What is your occupation? Ramazzini appeared on the eve of the Industrial Revolution. But during this period of turmoil and upheaval, his historic work was forgotten, and working conditions dropped to a level comparable to the worst in ancient times. It was this wholesale maiming and poisoning of workers that again focused attention on the importance of protecting their health. Industry developed even more rapidly in the New World. And by the beginning of the 20th century, the United States had grown into an industrial giant. But working conditions were almost as bad as those during the early days of the Industrial Revolution. The lead trades showed how completely the health of the workers was ignored at this time. In 1912, in one group of mines and smelters employing some 7,400 workers, about 1,800 cases of lead poisoning were found. This didn't begin to represent the full number, because most plants didn't keep medical records. The mining and processing of lead was only the beginning. For the story was the same, or even worse, in all the trades that used lead products. More than 22% of the pottery workers suffered from lead poisoning. Silica dust, which had been a serious hazard since ancient times, was an even greater one in our country. More workers than ever before were being exposed to these dangerous particles without protection. And as a result, the crippling and often deadly disease of silicosis was common among thousands of workers. Phosphorus poisoning, another disfiguring and disabling industrial disease, was discovered in our match industry. When a government report revealed the extent of the disease, Congress placed a tax on white phosphorus matches, and the United States companies adopted the harmless substitute used by the European match industry. But the poisonous materials were not the only industrial health hazards at this time. Often, as in the case of the sweatshops of the garment industry at the turn of the century, they took the form of unsanitary conditions, overcrowding, and lack of ventilation. It took a tragic fire and an industry-wide strike to focus attention on this particular hazard. One reason industry could ignore the health of its workers at this time was the seemingly inexhaustible supply of immigrant labor. Each year, thousands of these workers poured into the country, anxious to find jobs and making no demands about the conditions. We know that many who remained suffered and died from their work. We don't know how many thousands returned to their homelands, crippled and broken in health. As a result of early government investigation, some states began to adopt compensation laws to protect their workers. And the United States Public Health Service established an Office of Industrial Hygiene and Sanitation to study the industrial diseases. There was plenty to study during these early days. For example, during the 1920s, there was a serious outbreak of radium poisoning in the watch industry. In one plant, there were 48 cases of radium poisoning with 18 deaths. In another plant, 20 died. 4 were chemists or physicists, and 16 were girls who painted the luminous dials. The radium was traced to the radium salts used in the luminous paint.
The fact that most of these workers were stricken 4 to 7 years after they had left their jobs shows the slow and insidious way in which many industrial poisons work. Mercury was another widely used industrial material. The subtle, poisonous properties of this shimmering liquid metal had been known since the time of the Romans. Mercury poisoning in the felt hat industry and other trades had been notorious for centuries. It was the effects that mercury had on the mind that inspired eccentric fictional characters such as the Mad Hatter. As late as 1937, we found that more than 10% of our own hatters were suffering from mercury poisoning. Many of our old hazards continued to crop up in our newer industries. Lead, for example, was used to make petroleum products, rubber, and storage batteries. And in all these rapidly growing industries, lead poisoning began to appear. Some of the old hazards actually became worse under the influence of our rapidly developing technology. And as we became more aware of the nature of occupational health hazards, we began to find them everywhere. Farming, which had always been considered a healthy occupation, actually turned out to be a hazardous one. Farmers not only worked under extreme weather conditions, but they were also exposed to fungi and parasites and to the infectious diseases carried by farm animals. And with the increased use of chemicals and drugs on the farm, their work was steadily becoming more hazardous. We discovered that workers handling agricultural products were exposed to the same infectious diseases as farmers. And as industry expanded and new materials and processes were developed, more hazards began to appear. Some took the form of toxic dust, which could produce skin irritations, systemic poisoning, and even cancer. Others appeared as fumes, mists, vapors, and gases, many of which could be deadly if the concentration were high enough. We discovered other health hazards in heat and noise, and in the widespread use of electromagnetic radiation. Although the problem of protecting the workers' health is actually greater today than ever before, we also have more to work with. For around the experience and knowledge painfully gained over the years, a whole new field of medicine, industrial medicine, has grown up. In schools of public health, more and more specialists are being trained. Physicians, chemists, physicists, toxicologists, engineers, hygienists, nurses, all preparing themselves to work in the different areas of industrial health. And today there are many organizations that need their services. Most of the civilian activity of the federal government is conducted by the Division of Occupational Health of the U.S. Public Health Service. The central office in Washington furnishes the overall direction for a national program. In addition to research on occupational health hazards and problems, this program provides training and technical assistance to state and local agencies as well as other groups. Most of this work is done at the division's research and training centers. Here, studies are continuously being made to discover the causes and effects of industrial diseases. Many of these studies, such as those measuring the stresses and strain imposed by work demands, go way beyond the more obvious effects of exposure. For example, one of these long-range research projects is studying the effects of industrial noises, not only on the worker's hearing, but also on his ability to learn and perform demanding tasks. The division's analytic laboratories have the highly specialized skills and the elaborate scientific equipment needed to study the many hazardous substances, new and old. And here, new methods of analysis are continually being developed to identify the harmful materials in the work environment. Once potentially dangerous substances are identified, further studies are made in the toxicology laboratories to determine just how harmful they are. These are the kind of studies that help establish the safe tolerance levels for workers. And here, too, new tests are developed to detect early signs of poisoning. In other laboratories, dermatoses or skin irritations of all kinds are carefully studied. A large amount of research goes into this problem because this is the most common industrial disease. The division's engineers and other specialists also serve as consultants to governmental agencies, industry, and labor. And many professional people already working in occupational health attend their training courses. The division also sponsors research by educational institutions and private organizations throughout the country. But it is the state governments that are directly responsible for the health of their workers, and today practically all of them have occupational health programs. And they usually require a large staff of trained workers. These specialists work directly with industry not only to control any existing hazards, but to prevent new ones from developing. Often their preventive work begins in the blueprint stage, before the plants are even built. Almost all state offices have their own laboratories where industrial materials are analyzed and harmful substances can be quickly identified. State industrial hygienists are constantly on the watch for dangerous substances in concentrations that could be harmful. Many large plants have their own programs to prevent occupational disease and injury and assure prompt treatment when they do occur. And with such programs, they have been able to establish outstanding records in occupational health. Although most of these plans were originally limited to periodic physical examinations and first aid, today, almost all of them have been expanded to include general preventive health services. In smaller plants, the medical department often consists of an industrial nurse who provides emergency care, health counseling, and education, and a part-time plant physician who visits the plant periodically for examinations. Some plants use only a part-time nurse, but most of them have no medical facilities or services at all, depending largely on the state and local health agencies for occupational health guidance and supervision. Insurance companies have played an important role in helping reduce health hazards in industry. They not only do research, but they also provide consultation for the plants they insure. Some unions have their own health centers, which are primarily concerned with the general health of their workers. And some of these centers have industrial health specialists on their staffs. But most workers still rely on their private physicians for health guidance and treatment. And this means that whether he's aware of it or not, he serves as an industrial physician. Most of his patients work. And since almost every kind of work has its health hazards, he cannot afford to ignore his patient's occupation in making his diagnosis. Also, since this is the only examination most workers receive, he has an opportunity to spot the symptoms of industrial disease early. And if these are immediately reported, The hazards that produce them can be eliminated or controlled before large numbers of workers are affected. By consulting with the local industrial health specialists, the doctor also avails himself of their experience and knowledge in this area, along with the special equipment and laboratory facilities they have at their disposal to help identify industrial diseases. When the private physician recognizes this role and tries to fill it, he not only helps his patient, but he also performs an important public service. Investigation and troubleshooting are still major and essential activities in occupational health. But today, more and more emphasis is being placed on anticipating industrial hazards and controlling or eliminating them before they can damage the worker's health. Perhaps the best example of how effective this preventive method can be is the phenomenal safety record that we have achieved in the field of atomic energy. We knew the hazards were there, and health protection was a primary consideration in the development of this vast new field from the very beginning. The fact that we have been able to use these highly dangerous materials without damaging the health of workers graphically demonstrates the ability we've developed to control almost all occupational hazards. We know how to control most of the old hazards today, and we've already established standards and threshold limits for many of them. Now it's largely a matter of education and putting this knowledge to work. Furthermore, with the experience that we have gained working with the old hazards, we are in a better position than ever before to control the new ones as they appear. These accomplishments show how far we have come in many areas of occupational health. But we still face many problems. New equipment and methods dig and cut faster, but they also produce more dust, and so we still have silicosis. In small, unsupervised plants, poisonous materials such as lead are still used with little or no consideration for the danger to the worker, and we still have diseases such as lead poisoning. What makes this even more appalling is that the majority of our industrial workers earn their living in small plants. The huge chemical, petroleum, and plastics industries continue to turn out their steady stream of new materials. We know that many of these are potentially toxic. We also know that many will be used without any concern for the hazards involved. Many of these new materials will be used by agricultural workers in the form of insecticides and feed supplements. We know these chemicals will work wonders in destroying insects and fattening animals. But what about the men who continually use them with little or no protection? Other hazards, such as noise and heat, have been recognized for many years, but we still don't know precisely how they affect man or how much men can safely take without damaging their health. Automation and mechanization are rapidly being adopted by industry. But what about the men who must control these complex mechanical systems? Mental and psychological strain, we know, can be very real hazards. And what is the effect of our industrial environment on the steady and alarming increase in chronic diseases? For while the deaths from communicable diseases have steadily dropped since the turn of the century, the death rate from chronic diseases has sharply climbed. These and many other questions in occupational health remain to be answered. And before we can answer many of these questions, we need more accurate information that will help us determine the true extent of industrial diseases. Information that will also help us locate and identify the new hazards before they assume catastrophic proportions. And yet, not many more than half of our states require the medical reporting of industrial diseases, and only a few states actually receive more than 100 reports a year. Another serious problem that occupational health still has to contend with is the shortage of trained, capable people to work on these problems. Occupational health needs many times the number of people it now has. All these are problems that we, as a great industrial nation, cannot afford to ignore, for the cost could be staggering. And as we attack these problems, and new ones as they appear, we move closer to the day when all men will be able to work without endangering their health or their lives.
This is the story of Kenneth Randall, M.D. Kenneth Randall is more than a mere character of fiction. He is the personification of the spirit, the ideals, the disappointments, the sacrifices, the struggles, and the hopes of literally hundreds of physicians who throughout the years saw and what's more did something about the needs for advancement in industrial medicine.
Waterfall and in the evening, da-da-da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, dum. You know, Dr. Kenneth Randall, you're a very wonderful man.
That's right. Yeah, and come to think of it, you're a very, well, to say the least, a very brave young woman, Mrs. Randall.
Brave? Why do you say that?
Why? because you married me. Oh, but don't misunderstand. Actually, you have a wonderful catch in me. A brilliant young surgeon, fresh from an exciting career as an underpaid intern. But ready now to conquer the medical world and lay it at your feet. Ah, yes, I can see it all now. A huge banquet. All the prominent medical men in the country gathered to pay honor and tribute to Dr. Kenneth W. Randall, world-renowned, famous for his great contributions to well, something or other. Of course, you'll be there, too, as my proud little wife.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Mm-hmm. Ah, I can hear me now, as I stand to accept the tremendous ovation and make my acceptance speech. All that I am, or ever hope to be, I owe to my little wife.
Bravo! Bravo! Well, tell me, Ken, if you're such a wonderful catch, why am I so brave to marry you?
Because you didn't wait until I became a success. You married me now. Before I even have an office of my own. What you call sharing one with Dad in office. Before I even had my first regular patient. Sorry.
I'll take the basket here.
All right. Hello? 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 Hello?
Is it a patient?
Hello? There's nobody there.
No wonder there's no one there. That's the doorbell ringing. Here's your robe.
Oh, thank you, dear.
Gotta get there. Quick, Doc. Bill's hurt bad. Bleeding like anything.
I'll be back in a minute.
Darling, it was a patient.
One of the workmen was hurt over at the mill.
Oh, I'll get your clothes.
We can get there quicker if we cut across.
We'll take Dad's car.
Yeah.
Thanks. What are you doing there?
Using chewing tobacco for disinfect.
Sure, that's what we always do. Cobwebs for the bleeding and chewing tobacco for disinfect.
Here, let me in there.
Yes, sir.
We have to get this man to a hospital, quickly. Easy. Take it easy there.
Hello, Doctor.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
This is your chart. Here.
Has my son come in yet, Miss Lane?
No, he hasn't, Dr. Randall. Oh, here he is now.
Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Miss Lane.
Good morning.
Say, Ken, I looked in on that new patient of yours just now. Fellow from the mill. I hope you don't mind.
Gosh, no, Dad. What'd you think about him?
Looks like he'll be all right. Husky fellow. You did a fine job. Splendid piece of surgery.
Well, like father, like son, I hope, Dad.
That'll take years of hard work. By the way, you'd better accustom yourself to addressing me as doctor, especially around the hospital. I'll do the same.
Very well, Dad. Doctor.
Excuse me, Dr. Monroe left this for you to look at before you leave.
Thank you.
You know, I've been thinking. They have quite a number of accidents over there at the mill. I remember as a kid, you were always treating somebody from there, fixing a broken arm or something.
Yes, my fees from that mill alone probably put you through medical school.
I've been wondering if something couldn't be done about that. The accidents at the mill, I mean. It seems to me that...
Well, I doubt if anything can be done about it. There are always accidents, especially in a mill. Men grow careless, something goes wrong with the machinery.
Well, I don't know, it doesn't seem right to me. Isn't it part of a doctor's job to do everything he can to prevent accidents and sickness as well as to cure them?
Of course, but within reason. You can't close every mill and factory in town. No, you just concentrate on being a good surgeon and don't worry about anything else.
Dr. Randall, they're waiting for you in the operating room.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, tell Martha I'll be dropping in for dinner tonight.
I'll see you in just a moment.
Mason, what's the matter with you fellows over there at the plant? I thought I told you to come in and have this hand dressed every day. Johnson's as bad as you are. His wound should be dressed every day, too. Yet he hasn't been in for a week. You fellows at the plant are all alike.
Gosh, Doc, it ain't so easy. We work all day, and at night, well, it seems when we get home and get cleaned up and have our supper, well, I don't know. It seems there just ain't no time for running to the doctor.
I have an idea. What time do you fellows quit for lunch? About 11:30. Perhaps if you men can't find the time, maybe I can. How would it be if I came over to the plant tomorrow at 11:30?
Gee, do you think you could do that, Doc? Gosh, if you can come over to the plant, that'll help things out a lot.
All right.
Say, Doc, I wish you'd kind of take a look at my back. It seems to be hurting all the time.
Sure, I'll take a look at it. So, slip your shirt off, will you? Hey, Jim, that'll fix you up.
Okay, Doc, thanks a lot.
Well, that's it. Now, let's see. Where does it hurt? Here? Ah, it hurt you there, huh? Do you do much lifting, Judd?
Most all the time, Doc. You'd think I'd be used to it, wouldn't you?
How long has your back been hurting you?
Oh, for several months, off and on. But lately, it's been hurting most of the time.
Well, how about getting transferred to some other kind of job? A job where you wouldn't have to do any lifting.
Why, I've had lifting jobs all the time.
Well, if you keep on lifting, Judd, that pain in your back's going to get worse. You'll be laid up, maybe for a long time. Now, my advice is go see your family doctor as soon as you're through work this afternoon. Get him to give your back a thorough examination and see what he advises you to do.
Well, all right if you say so, but I thought maybe you could give me something to rub in and take the pain away.
That wouldn't do any good, Judd. Now, don't put off seeing your doctor. Go see him as soon as you're through work today. Will you?
Well, all right if you say so. Got a little cut in my arm, Doc. Did it this morning. As long as you're going to be around here, I thought maybe you'd take a look at it. It ain't much.
Yep, this morning, huh? Well, let's see here. Did you dress this yourself?
Yeah.
I see. Sit down here, Bill. Bill, you fellas ought to have a first aid kit around here.
Yeah, except we wouldn't know how to use it.
Well, I'd be glad to teach somebody to give first aid treatment. Come in handy in cases like this.
Say, Art,
Yeah, Bill?
come on over here. Art's always around helping when anyone's hurt. He'd be a good one to teach first aid to.
What's up? Hello, Doc Randall.
Well,
Doc here wants to know if you want to be his assistant.
Bill suggested that you might be interested in learning a little about giving first aid in cases like this.
Yeah, that'd be all right.
Well, fine. I'll leave some iodine, some bandages, and a few,
How about putting stuff in here? I don't use this box anymore.
Yes, that'll make quite a medical department. Yes, quite a medical department.
One morning, about 3 weeks later, Dr. Randall Sr. was reading a newspaper. What he saw didn't exactly please him.
Say, Ken. Oh, hello, Martha. Kenneth, listen to this. Worker threatens suit for alleged back injuries. Decision to sue based on diagnosis of Dr. Kenneth Randall. Well, I hope you realize a thing like that can cost us every good patient we have. I've spent years trying to build up a dignified and successful practice, and then you come along and get yourself mixed up in a thing like this. Son, I wish you hadn't done it.
But, Dad, what would you have me do? I suggested he see his own doctor and take his advice. Anything wrong with that?
What I mean is, you should have stayed away from the factory in the first place. And, Kenneth, I'm going to seriously suggest that from now on, you do your practicing in this office. Or the hospital surgery. That's your #1 responsibility. And stay away from factories. That's not the life for you. Martha, I'll drop in for dinner tonight.
Oh, fine.
Martha, I've always felt that for a man to be a success in his own eyes, he's got to be more than just a competent member of his profession.
I don't quite see what you're getting at.
Oh, I mean, to be really successful, or maybe I should say worthy, a carpenter, a tool maker, engineer, preacher, or a doctor should contribute something to the advancement of human progress through his profession. Maybe it's just finding new ways to make something better or cheaper. Maybe it's fighting and working unselfishly for a just cause.
Ken, you sound just like a high school valedictorian.
Well, maybe so, but I mean it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm beginning to think that my job is doing something for the advancement of a new kind of medical practice.
New? In what way?
Well, new from the point of view of a doctor working to cut down sickness and accidents in the town's factories and mills. Yes, I suppose you could call it the practice of industrial medicine.
But Ken, you know what your father will say.
What's more important, Martha? What do you say?
All that I am, or ever hope to be, I owe to my wife. In that case, I'd better do all I can to help in whatever job you undertake. How are you going to go about it?
Well, right now, I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm going to do something.
Doctor, Mr. Gregg and I have been talking over the idea of your coming into the plant for a regular period each day.
I must say, the idea of a doctor in a factory seems quite unusual to me, to say the least.
Sit down, Doctor.
No, gentlemen, there's nothing new about a doctor in industry, and I've been interested in the idea for some time. So when you said you wanted to see me, I came right over.
We heard about you treating some of the men during their lunch hour. We think maybe we can carry the plan a little further.
Frankly, that was what I hoped you had in mind when you called me. You see, for the past several months, I've been doing quite a good deal of research and study on the subject of, well, I call it industrial medicine. I've been trying to find out what's already been done by others. It's been most revealing, and I might add, at times, a bit discouraging. As I said, the idea isn't exactly new. People have been trying to do something about industrial medicine for hundreds of years. Only, for the most part, very little progress has been made.
But now the states are passing these workmen's compensation laws. That takes care of it, doesn't it?
No, not exactly, Mr. Gregg. Industrial medicine stresses the preventive side of sickness and accidents in the factories, the mines, and the mills.
Dr. Randall, as far as we're concerned here in this plant, just what would you propose, specifically?
I've worked out a rather complete program. I think this would be a good start. First, the program would include a complete physical examination for every employee, a permanent and well-equipped first aid station in the plant. Third, there should
Just
also
a
be...
minute. You know, we're running a factory here, not a hospital. I'm afraid your ideas are a little too ambitious for us, Doctor.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I only...
Now, hold on, Sam. One or two of the suggestions you have here are well worth considering, Doctor. In other words, I think we can go along at least part way with you. Anyway, for a start. Now, here's what I suggest. Beginning next Monday morning, you'll make regular calls here at the plant. Say from 10 to 12. And we'll fix up a place for you to work. And I think there's merit in this idea of the first aid station. Don't you, Sam?
Well, it might work out as a good investment at that. Save a lot of production time and keep the men on the job.
And as far as examinations are concerned, well, we'll talk about that later. What do you say, Doctor?
All I can say is it's a big step in the right direction. And now, gentlemen, if you'll excuse me, I have a few calls to make.
Of course. Good day, Doctor.
Good day.
Doctor. You know, I just got an idea. There might be some advantages in this idea of physical examinations at that. At least for new employees.
I'm glad you think so.
Sure. A physical examination would weed out a man like Harris in the beginning. If they're unfit and can't do the work, why, let them get a job someplace else. Save us a lot of grief.
Well, I don't think that's quite what the doctor or I had in mind. Anyway, I think we'll adopt the pre-employment examination plan and give it a try. Better call the doctor and tell him we've decided on examinations, too.
Not too much dry mustard for Dad, Ken.
Yeah, I know, and not too much vinegar. Well, if I do say so myself, it's just the way Dad likes it. Say, darling, you know, this is really a celebration tonight. Old man Duncan accepted my ideas. Well, some of them anyway. I begin making regular calls to the factory on Monday.
Oh, darling, you're wonderful.
They even decided to try a pre-employment physical examination. First, they wouldn't go for that part at all. Couldn't see the advantages.
Well, tell me, Dr. Randall, just what are the advantages of physical examinations for the employees?
Why, gentlemen, they're obvious. In the first place, they protect the worker from himself. In other words, some people have ailments they don't even suspect. In that case, I'll advise them to go to their own doctors for treatments. But that's only one of the advantages. The examination also protects fellow workers from communicable diseases and so forth. But it's just as important to get people placed on jobs they're physically capable of doing. This way, we can make allowances for anybody with a physical handicap. Not just put them on any old job.
At least it's the ideal way.
Well, it's more than that. Seriously, Martha, I think it's a practical way to cut down on sickness and accidents due to putting some poor fellow on the wrong kind of a job. If a fellow's healthy, he's happy. And if a man's happy in his job, then...
That's Dad. Now, Ken, whatever you do, don't talk about your industrial medicine during dinner.
Okay, sweet, I won't start an argument.
Kenneth?
Yes, Dad?
I had a phone call this afternoon. It was meant for you.
Well, that's not unusual, Dad. We often get our calls mixed.
This was Sam Gregg at the factory.
Oh, well, he probably wanted
Won't
to know
you have
about...
some more coffee,
Huh?
Ken?
Oh, no, thanks, Mom.
I gather from what he said, you decided against my advice. You're going to be Kenneth Randall, the factory doctor.
Well, I'll admit it doesn't sound very fancy.
Well, does that mean that you're giving up your practice? Just as you're beginning to make a name for yourself?
Certainly not. I'm merely going to expand. I'll only be at the factory for a few hours each morning.
Expand in a factory? What about your regular patients? You can hardly expect them to come to a doctor who's out wrapping sore fingers in a factory.
Dad, you don't seem to see what it is I'm trying to do.
It's what you call industrial medicine. Yes, I know. All very fine and noble. But that's not the job for you. Leave it for someone else who can pay the price. You concentrate on being a good surgeon.
What do you mean, pay the price?
Do you think patients like Mrs. Carter Wellman will want a factory doctor for their physician?
Somehow, Dad, I don't care what Mrs. Carter Wellman or anyone like her thinks.
Well, I do. I've spent years making my name an important one in the medical profession. Not only in this town, but throughout the state. I've looked forward to the day when I could hand my practice over to you. And I can't conceive of your deliberately throwing away an opportunity like this for the doubtful security of becoming a salaried member of a factory staff. I can think of no better way for you to tear down the work I've done and besmirch the name I'm proud of.
It's my name too, Dad. And I certainly have no intention of besmirching it in any way. Frankly, I don't see...
Well, you should see. I've told you often enough. If you don't care anything about yourself, your practice, or me, then think of Martha. You owe something to her.
But, Father, I advised Ken to go ahead with what he wanted to do.
Well, you can't be blamed for that. You didn't know. But do you realize what people will say? They'll call him an unethical incompetent who couldn't get by in private practice. That's what they'll say.
There's nothing unethical about the work of a good factory doctor. You know that, Dad.
I do not. In my personal opinion, the whole idea is unethical.
Why? Because you think it's new, untried?
Not only that, you'd be working with some other doctor's patients. You couldn't steal them all away.
That's not fair, Dad. I never interfere with another doctor's private practice, and you know it.
Well, yes. But I'd be the only one who does know it. And here's something else. You or no other man can serve two masters.
What do you mean by that remark?
You can't be loyal to your patients and at the same time be loyal to the man who's paying you a salary. And believe me, there'll be many times when you'll have to make decisions based on that very thing. I'll bet you never even thought about that.
No, I haven't thought about that. I haven't had to.
Well, you will. Mark my words.
But when I do, my first allegiance will be to my patients, to humanity, to the community.
What about Duncan and his stockholders? Don't forget, they'll be paying you. You'll be working for them.
I don't consider it that way.
Well, then on top of everything else, you're not even being honest with yourself.
Oh, yes, I am. By basing my decisions on what's best for my patients, the community, and then the plant, in the long run, I'll do a better job of serving Mr. Duncan and the stockholders. Don't just see, Dad. I sincerely believe in the idea of industrial medicine. Not only in this town, but in thousands of plants all over the country.
Well, that's not up to you to worry about. That's up to the men who run the factory.
No, you're wrong, Dad. Industry wants help. They don't want just surgical repairmen. They want...
Don't say anything more. I can see that you're determined, in spite of my disapproval and disappointment. And nothing I can say will dissuade you.
I'm afraid not.
Well, we can no longer share the same office.
I'm sorry, Dad.
Good night, Martha.
Oh, Dad, you don't mean...
Yes, dear. I'm afraid I do.
And this was only the first of the many bitter disappointments, conflicts, and sacrifices that came to the young doctor who had made his decision to become an industrial physician. Most of the conflict, like the basis of all trouble, was just misunderstanding. In the beginning, the workers themselves resented the physical examinations, and many submitted only under protest. Some of the foremen were short-sighted and resisted special job placement recommendations for handicapped employees. They said,
I'll let him stick to his pill.
We'll run the plant.
We'll place the men where we decide.
and while time solved most of the old problems, it also brought many new ones. For instance, there were cases where a man was suddenly taken sick on the job. Naturally, he was brought to the doctor in the plant.
What happened, boys?
I don't know. He just fainted.
Okay, thanks.
This is when the health record made out at the time of employment examination proved its value as an aid in diagnosis. But here, the illness had no relation to the job. Treatment in this case was outside the responsibility of the plant doctor. This was a case for the employee's private physician, providing the man had one. Yes, this was a problem. Often, too, the man would say,
"You know all about my case, Doc. You're here all the time. You might as well continue the treatment."
I'm afraid not.
And if the doctor did take the case, he was accused of using his factory job to acquire patients for his own private practice.
Right, Doctor.
Call him an unethical incompetent. Never be able to steal them all. You or no other man can serve two masters. That's the thing I want.
With Father, I advised Ken to go ahead with what he wanted to do.
But then, gradually, things began to work out a little more smoothly. The workers and their families began to recognize the true benefit and respond to the sincerity, the medical skill, the ethical practices, civic cooperation, and the good judgment of the factory doctor. And even the other doctors in town were beginning to realize that instead of stealing patients away, Dr. Randall was actually sending more and more of them to their own physicians. They gradually realized that Dr. Randall was not only improving the health conditions in the factory, but working for the benefit and general health of the community as a whole. Slowly, the cloud of misunderstanding was beginning to lift. But then came 1914. So, like thousands of other young physicians, Kenneth Randall answered his country's call.
Why, you sure look fine, Doc. And we're mighty glad to have you back.
It goes without saying that I'm glad to be back.
Well, it took the war to make us realize that industrial medicine represents another one of the many major problems that we manufacturers still have to solve. Our medical center was busier than ever before while you were away. Miss McDonald did an excellent job, too. She's a mighty fine nurse.
Yes, she is. I'd like to keep her on. Maybe full time. Because if it's all right with you, Mr. Duncan, from now on, during most of the time I do spend here in the plant, I'll want to concentrate on the industrial hygiene phase. There's a big job to be done in that field.
Well, there's plenty of time to think about all that later. We'll be glad to pick up just where you left off. You know, just give us a few hours a day like you used to.
Good.
Right now, let's go out to the shop.
Fine.
The boys will be glad to see you.
I'd like to see them.
The World War had been over for 14 years. But as the time slipped by, the only contact between Kenneth Randall and his father had been through Martha's regular visits with the still embittered elder doctor.
Yes, Father. Right after the war, things were a lot different. But as you know, Ken started right in and worked harder than ever in his private practice, as well as in his industrial medicine. Oh, things had changed a lot, and he didn't have quite as many difficulties as he'd had in the pre-war days. But there was one thing that still troubled him.
What was that?
Well, shortly after he came back from France, he was interviewing applicants for jobs at the plant. There was a young returned soldier in his office who had come to Ken with a problem.
So you were in the Battle of the Marne, huh?
Sure was. That's how I picked up this shrapnel. And, Doc, I just gotta have a job. It seems that every place I go, they hang out the no help wanted sign.
Yes, I know.
Only hiring able-bodied men, they tell me. All I know is factory work. They could use me somewhere, someplace.
I think so. I think perhaps our employment office can arrange something where you'll be sitting down when you work. Now, I've written some instructions on this card. You take this down to the personnel office.
Gee, thanks, Doc.
Good luck, and drop in to see me.
I'm sorry, soldier. Really, I am. You were sitting down along with the others when I was handing out the applications. I didn't notice your cane, or I could have told you then. Could have saved you the bother.
But the doctor said that...
Unfortunately, the doctor doesn't make the rules, nor do I, for that matter. I'm sorry. Keep your chin up, boy. You'll find something besides factory work.
Well, from then on, Ken seemed to feel that rehabilitation of the returned soldier was his personal problem. He did everything possible to help solve it. But at that time, there wasn't very much he could do.
Yes, I know about that.
So then, as the years went by, he spent more and more time working on the problems of his industrial medicine.
And less time on the problems of developing a successful private practice. That was a shame.
No, he was doing something he felt was needed. He used to stay up till all hours of the night studying books on the causes and prevention of occupational diseases, and even books on factory engineering. He spent a lot of time visiting different plants in all parts of the state, studying the health conditions of the workers, taking samples of dust, of oil, bringing them back to his little office laboratory, making chemical analyses, experimenting. Later on, he made speeches and read papers on the history of occupational diseases to gatherings of industrialists and physicians. And Father, Ken has made a success of his life and the work he wanted to do. Why, today he's considered almost an authority on industrial medicine.
But he would have made such a fine surgeon. That's the success I always wanted for Ken.
He is a fine surgeon.
What I mean is, well, with his hands and brain, he could have been... Oh, well. What's the use of talking?
Father, Ken and I are leaving the city. We're going to move.
And try to build up a practice somewhere else? It's too late for that now. That's positively insane.
No, Ken is giving up his practice. He's been offered a position with a large automobile manufacturer. Dad, that's what he's been wanting all his life. A chance to work out his plans and theories in a large organization. There's so much he wants to do.
A full-time factory doctor, eh? Well, that's the last straw. My son, a full-time factory doctor.
Won't you come home and have dinner with Ken and me tonight? Please.
Well, Martha, I haven't been in your house in a good many years. Now it's too late. You tell Ken... Tell him I wish him luck.
Once again, the world was at war. The time was 1942, and Dr. Randall had been called into the office of one of the company's executives.
Well, thanks. But what's this for?
Why, Doctor,
Don't you know what day this is?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
I was looking over some records this morning. I discovered that this is your 10th anniversary with us. You did a fine job, Doctor, during those first 3 years of the divisions. And I'm speaking for all of us when I say you've done a superb job during the past 7, since you've been directing the medical activities of the entire corporation.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fine cooperation from the company.
But now the war means we have a bigger job ahead of us. Employment is still on the increase. And with the tremendous demands of our war effort, it's more important than ever that we keep our people healthy. That's really what I wanted to see you about. Doctor, what I want to ask you is how, from a medical standpoint, are we prepared for this work that's ahead of us?
As a matter of fact, we're in fine shape. We've made tremendous strides in all of our divisional medical departments. You know, even if we had known what was going to happen throughout the world, we couldn't have made better preparations during these last years. Let me explain what I mean. Right today, we have plenty of facilities and equipment to make thorough examinations. We have adequate examination rooms for both men and women. X-ray machines to ensure careful examinations of the lungs. We have completely equipped consulting rooms. And we are gradually attaining our goal of full-time staffs of nurses and technical assistants in all plants. We have fully equipped laboratories for analysis. Years ago, we found out the importance of a good filing system, whereby the medical record, the medical history of every employee can always be kept up to date. Time and time again, an up-to-date medical history has proved invaluable both to the doctor and to the patient. We learned, too, the importance of having the therapeutic, the treatment rooms, entirely separate from the examination rooms. We're equipping them with heat lamps, foot baths, and we have facilities for eye care, too. We have made great strides in our surgical rooms. They're fully equipped to meet practically any emergency.
Yes, I see what you mean.
As I say, in all the things we've done and are doing, it's almost as though we'd been preparing for just such a time of need as this. But what I've just told you is only a part of the whole program.
Go on, tell me the rest.
Well, we are learning more and more to cut down on occupational disease by control of dust, control of fumes. And we are making great headway in equipping our plant with better dust traps, fume duct. The medical department has worked hand in hand with the safety engineers. We saw the importance of safety devices, such as color contrast painting on moving parts, safety ramps, overhead conveyor guards, hand guards. We also realized the importance of equipping employees with respirators, goggles, safety headdress, safety shoes, whenever necessary, of having the lighting checked regularly, of having air conditioning in the plants, and this is most important too, the regular inspections in the washrooms and cafeterias. Here's a phase that people seldom think about in its relation to preventive medicine. And that is intelligent, carefully planned medical participation in the induction program for new employees. I had the opportunity of listening in on part of a program just the other day. A good induction program should take into consideration the fact that many of the new employees, especially the women, have never worked in a factory before. You see, I feel that a proper explanation of the whys and wherefores of the safety rules, a complete job of conditioning, is the first step in preventive medicine. And here again, in the induction of new employees, we've made great progress.
A complete and well-planned induction certainly makes sense to me, Doctor. What's more, I'd say your entire medical program is complete. Wouldn't you say so?
No, it's not complete, although we've certainly come a long way. For instance, One of the things we still have to do more work on is selective placement, getting the right man on the right job, which of course means placing people in jobs they're physically capable of doing. And all that ties in with a part of the work I haven't yet mentioned. To me, it's perhaps one of the most important contributions that industrial medicine can ever make. And that? A broad program for the rehabilitation of the thousands of servicemen already coming back. That is the immediate and urgent job ahead of us. And that is what I'm really going to work on.
Once again, we of the American Association of Industrial Physicians and Surgeons are assembled to present our annual award to the man who, during the past year, has made the most outstanding contribution in the field of industrial medicine. This year, that contribution has been a very practical program for the rehabilitation of the returning servicemen. Now, these men need jobs, yes. But it takes more than just a job to carry these injured and war-exhausted men through the critical transition from military to civilian life. It takes a well-planned, carefully executed program of rehabilitation within industry. As you all know, before making our annual award, the committee makes a rather complete and exhaustive study of the work of the recipient we select. We report these findings as a reason for our selection. Tonight, we want to support our choice for the award by a first-hand report. Ladies and gentlemen, I present a fighting Marine with a row of battle ribbons long enough to, well, long enough to make you proud. Ex-Sergeant Harry Brown.
I thought I'd seen a lot of doctors when I was overseas, wounded, but tonight, wow. And all looking right at me. It makes a fella kind of nervous. Dr. Calvin asked me to come here tonight to tell you a little something about what's happened to me since I've been back home. Well, after I got back, rested up for a while, I decided to see about getting my old job back at the plant. Mary wasn't too hopeful on account of my game leg, but she was cheerful and didn't try to discourage me. Well, as a matter of fact, I wasn't any too cheerful myself. I was all confused down inside. I didn't know how they'd treat me. I didn't know what to expect. I was nervous, but I wanted that job. I needed it bad. Well, I guess the men at the plant kind of knew how I felt about it. Because during my interview with the personnel director, he made me feel that I was really welcome. Oh, he didn't exactly make me feel like a hero, but, well, maybe it was respect for the uniform I was still wearing. Anyway, he was friendly. He made me feel like an individual, and not just some guy after a job. Next, I talked to the company's employment manager. And I guess he's a pretty smart man, too. Because instead of asking me a lot of questions, we just kind of visited. Before I knew it, I was talking about myself like nobody's business. I guess he found out a lot more about me that way than if I'd had to fill out a lot of long forms. Then I met the doctor and got my physical. And believe me, this physical was complete. I ought to know. By now, I'm an authority on him. The doctor checked me over from head to toe. He x-rayed my chest, checked my blood, and Well, I guess you doctors know all about that. The doctor made a complete record of my physical shape. And in addition to that, I found out later he made a lot of notes about my temperament, language, and general attitude. He didn't miss a trick. Well, finally, he gave me an okay for a job. But it was restricted to a job that I could do sitting down and away from a lot of noise. You see, he'd discovered that I was still jumpy where a lot of loud noises are concerned. Oh, then I showed my medical okay to my coordinator. And he told me how the company puts vets like me into jobs we're best suited for. I took some special aptitude tests that were later checked by an advisory council. Then I went back to my coordinator, and he gave me my job. Next, I went to the safety department, and the safety director gave me a lot of instructions about my particular job. And after that, well, after that came my introduction to one of the swellest guys I ever met, my new foreman. Oh, I got along fine. Oh, I was a little slow at first, but I caught on after a while. And Mary sure was happy, I can tell you that. After I'd been on the job for a while, I met several other men who'd been in the service and were working there at the plant. Well, they were getting along fine. You see, the plan doesn't stop with us just getting jobs they think we can do. They have what they call the follow-through system. This means another physical checkup every so often. They follow through to see how we like our jobs, how we're getting on. They just follow through until everybody is sure we feel at home, just like any other guy on his job. You see, the company realizes that it takes us a little while to make the normal readjustment, to get back into the old swing of normal life. Now, I'll admit that some of us returned vets expect too much, others not so much. But we're all realizing that the main responsibility of this readjustment thing is ours, personal. All I'm trying to say, and I think I can speak for all the boys who have come back to good, honest jobs, is that a chance to work at a job, well, that's one of the things we fought for. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I need say any more as to the value of the work that's been done in the Industrial Rehabilitation Program. Many men throughout the nation have done and are doing superb jobs in industry's rehabilitation program. Their work has been splendid. However, it is my privilege and my pleasure to present the association's annual award to the man who has made not only the year's greatest contribution to industrial medicine for outstanding work in veterans rehabilitation, but a man who has, throughout the years, been a pioneer, an inspiring leader, a builder in the cause of industrial medicine. I present Dr. Kenneth W. Randall.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, in accepting this award, for which I am grateful, and by which I am highly honored, I do so with the full knowledge that I am merely sharing this honor with you and the many, many other industrial physicians throughout the country who are doing so much in the important work of veteran rehabilitation. And as for me being a pioneer in industrial medicine, well, maybe we all were, and still are for that matter. We've come a long way, A long, long way. The history of modern industrial medicine has been a full one. And when I think back over the years...
Well, thanks. But what's this for?
And, Doc, I just gotta have a job. It seems that every place I go, they hang out the no help wanted sign.
Yes, I know.
I can see that you're determined, in spite of my disapproval and disappointment. And nothing I can say will dissuade you.
I begin making regular calls to the factory on Monday.
Darling, you're wonderful.
Yes, I make quite a medical department. Yes, quite a medical department.
Using chewing tobacco, disinfect. Sure, that's what we always do.
Ah, yes, I can see it all now. A huge banquet. All the prominent medical men in the country gathered to pay honor and tribute to Dr. Kenneth W. Randall, world-renowned, famous for his great contributions to, well, something. Of course, you'll be there, too, with my proud little wife.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Ah, I can hear me now, as I stand to accept the tremendous ovation and make my acceptance speech.
But this isn't the speech I had prepared against such an occasion as this. The speech I had prepared begins, as I recall. All that I am, or ever hope to be, I owe to my wife.